Right, hello, and welcome to another Dauntless Development video. Now today we're going to be looking at classes. Now, just going to close that. We've used classes before, and we've not really drawn attention to it. But well, I say we've used classes, we have used a class, because every program has at least one class, and inside that one class that you start out with, which is generally called program, you have one function, which is the main function, which we've talked about the main function previously. So this is the entry point of the program, this is the exit point of the program. So, what is a class? A class is kind of like a container or a thing. So it has traits, it has information, so there's data stored in it. It also has functions, so it can do tasks. Think of, for example, and this is an example I'll keep referring back to, if you had a class that was a car. So a car has lots of different information, like top speed, acceleration, weight, number of doors, number of seats, etc. Loads of different information. It also has lots of functions, so it can drive, it can brake, it can increase throttle, decrease throttle, change gear, lots of different functions, turn on indicators. So it also has lots of different functions. Now, so using that, if you think of like kind of like that, so all a class is it's just an object, a thing that can not only has information stored about it, but it can do things. Now you can use classes and just store information, and you can use classes and just have functions. But the point is they can do both. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by creating a class. So one thing just before we do that, just to note, is we're in this namespace here. Now your namespace name might be different because it'll be whatever you've named your project. Or maybe you've changed the namespace, maybe you know about namespaces. But if you're unaware about namespaces, we'll cover this more in a later video. But essentially, for the purposes of what we're doing now, just make sure that all your classes have the same namespace around them. And whenever you create a new class, it'll automatically create a namespace. Now for me, I've named the namespace tutorials, even though my program is called Hello World up here. So when I create a new class, by default it'll call it Hello World, and I'll just change that. But you need to make sure they have the same name for now anyway. So we'll start off by creating a new class. So we do that by going over to the right, over to the Solution Explorer, and we can right click this little C# thing, hit add, and then click on class, and then we can name it something. So I'm going to name it message class. Now you see there's lots of different options down there. They're all kind of valid, but we're making just a class. So as you can see, just like I said, it's changed the namespace to Hello World for this class, but the other one's still the same. So we need them to match, so I'm just going to change this to tutorials. Right. So our message class. So as I said, just like if you had a car, you can store information and you can perform functions. So this message class is going to store a string called message, as it is a message class. So this is going to be the message we're going to store. So I'm going to just say, hello, I am from another class. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically print a message from this class using a function inside here. So make a new function. So I'm going to make this. So one thing to note actually before we carry on is if we want the class to be, if we want to be able to call the functions inside the class and access information, we need to set it as public. Now by default, if you don't specify, it will be marked as private. So that's just exactly the same as writing private. Now obviously you don't need to write private because it's defaulted to private, but it's good practice to make sure that you lay it out clearly and specify which is private and which is public. Now private just means it can only be accessed from inside this class. Public means other classes can access it. So this message is only something that can be directly accessed from this class. Now what we can do is we can say public void. Just like when we covered functions, this just means that we have no return type. So we're not sending any information back to be used. We're going to just perform whatever's inside this function and then finish. We're not going to return any information afterwards. So we're going to say public void send message. So what we'll do here is we then open some curly braces, and then we're going to say console dot writeLine, and then we're just going to say message. So what we're doing here is this function, as I said, it's public, so that means it can be called from outside, from other classes, and it's going to call the writeLine function from the console class. So you can see we have been using classes before, because console is a class. You see class system.console down there, and then this writeLine is a function inside there. So what we can do is we can go over to our program, and now there's two ways we could do this. For simplicity's sake, to avoid explaining anything else, we're going to declare this inside the main function. So we're going to say message class MC, just because it's short for message class, and then we're going to say equals new message class. Now, the reason we do this equals new is what we're saying is we're creating a variable or a class of type message class. We're naming it MC, and then we're setting it equal to a new message class. So that means what we're specifying is we're making a brand new one. We're not using this to point towards a pre-existing message class. We're creating a new one from scratch. And then what we can do inside here is we can then say MC dot send message. Just kind of like if we used console.writeLine. So now when we run this program, you can see that that message is there. Now, one thing to note is this string here is private. Now, the reason we can see that from the other class is because we accessed it inside this public function. So this public function here, so that message wasn't accessed by this class. It was accessed by its own class, and then it was sent through this function. Now you can do a lot of things with different classes. As I said, going back to the car example that I gave before, where you could have a car which has a top speed, etc. You can kind of just to kind of explain why we have this message class MC and we don't just say message class dot whatever, which as you can see it's not coming up there. Now the reason for that is because you want to be able to have, well, not all the time, there is cases for something different, but we'll cover that more after. Generally, you want to have multiple types of a class, because a class isn't necessarily the one and only thing. So for example, car. Not every car is the same, so you don't want to have a single class with the information about one car, because there's lots of different types of cars. There's different brands, there's different models. So you could have say you had a car class. Well, actually, we'll just quickly do that now. So I'm going to make a new class. So it's just the same process. So add class, and I'm going to just call it car. So you can see there, I'm going to change this to tutorials just like I did earlier. So this class car, it has lots of information that it would store. So it would have, let's say, private string brand, or I'll just say brand. Might not be the right term, but yeah. We'll have a private float for top speed. And etc. etc. And you can think of all the information we could have, and then what we can do, in fact, I'll just make these public just so we can quickly change them, just as it's a bit more convenient for now. We'll cover a bit more on how to handle private and public in another video as well. But yes, so say you've got a car class here. Now what we could do is we could say, oops, I'm in the wrong class. So in here we could have a car called, let's say Ford. Obviously there are lots of Fords, but let's just say Ford. And it's equal to a new car. So we've just made a new car here. And then what we can say is we can say Ford. I've just realized that, yeah, brand equals Ford. But yeah, you know, you get the idea. So I'll say brand equals Ford. And then I can say Ford dot top speed equals, let's just say 150 F. So you've got a top speed of 150 and then whatever unit, miles per hour, kilometers per hour, I don't know. But you get the idea. So I could have that, but then I could also create a new car called car Toyota. And in fact, you know what? even though the other one's called Ford, just because I've realized that I have the brand in there, I'll say Camry. There we go, a specific one. It's a new car. Oops. Remember to put semicolons on the end of your lines. So then I can say Camry dot brand equals Toyota. Honestly, I can't type. And then we could say Camry dot top speed equals, I don't know, 120 F. Now the reason I'm putting F here, you don't actually have to when you don't have any decimal places. But with floats, it's good practice to always put F at the end. That's just kind of how you write them. Because if you have, say if it was 120.5, it will, yeah, you get a red underline, and you've got to specify F at the end, that it's a floating point. That's just kind of how you got to write it. I'm not entirely certain on the reason behind that, but yeah. So, but you can see, so you could have lots of different cars, lots of different ones, but they all share the same types of information. That's why you do that. Now there is a way of having a single one. So say like this message class, there's not really a need to have different message classes potentially. I mean, you could have a different one with different messages, but say for example with this, if you just wanted to have the one message class. Now you can see in here that we have static program, static main. Now what that means is there is one that only will ever be one, and there aren't multiple different copies. So whereas there's different types of car here, we could have only one type of message class. Now this is going to break some stuff, but what we can say is static. Oops. I'm just gonna say public. I'm gonna make sure it's public. And now if you make it static, you've got to make everything else static as well. But yes, so what static means, as I said, is there is only one and there only will ever be one. Therefore, you don't need to specify lots of different names for different ones. So you can see everything's underlined now because that doesn't work anymore. But what we can do, instead of saying message class, instead of making a new one, we can just say message class dot send message. So if you only have one, then there's no need to keep making different copies. You can just call it directly, and it will run exactly the same as before. So yeah, that's a little brief look at static. We'll use this a lot more in the future. And yeah, we've covered a bit of classes. So that's all for today, and I'll see you next time.